Hi, I'm Sarah and welcome to CoreMoodz, and today I'll be talking to you about the successful TV show adaptation A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. So the TV show, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, is based on the successful and popular book by J.R.R. Martin, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. The book is a compilation of 3 novellas. The first novella is called The Hedge Knight. The second novella is called The Sworn Sword, and the third novella is called The Mystery Knight. All 3 novellas were published in a span of 12 years, and they were then compiled into the book A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which was adapted into a TV show earlier this year. The 6 episodes of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms focus solely on the first story, which is called The Hedge Knight. If you're familiar with the world of A Song of Ice and Fire created by George R.R. Martin, or the TV show Game of Thrones, or the prequel TV show House of the Dragon, then you will already be kind of familiar with the world that this story takes place in. But A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms has a completely different vibe. It has the rawness, the pain, but it's from a different point of view. It's from the point of view of the peasants, of the people that they call the small folk. I found it very refreshing to read 3 stories, 3 novellas written by George R.R. Martin, a great author, in a world that is very creative and very vast, but centered on the small folk, the everyday people. We start the story following Dunk. Dunk is an orphan in King's Landing, in an area of the city they call Flea Bottom. He and a knight, Sir Arlen, cross paths, and Sir Arlen takes Dunk as his squire. And we start the story with Sir Arlen passing away and Dunk trying to find his way into being a hedge knight, traveling to a tourney, seeing if he can participate. He has a squire, a little boy called Egg, and through the 3 novellas, we follow Sir Duncan the Tall, Dunk, and his squire, Egg, while they get into conflicts and into troubles. Of course, this is George R.R. Martin, so the story is not as simple as I'm explaining it. There's a lot of other stuff going on. This story takes place, I would say, 90 years before the events of Game of Thrones and about 80 years after the events of House of the Dragon. So it's exactly in that spot. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Blackfire Rebellion. It's after the first rebellion, because there were a couple of different rebellions. Dunk, Sir Duncan the Tall, is played by Peter Claffey. Egg is played by Dexter Sol Ansel. Throughout the show, you're introduced to other lords and princes, and of course, important people of that time that happened to be at that tourney. So what worked, and why do I think that this adaptation is the best George R.R. Martin adaptation that we have been able to watch to this date? I think it's because it's a return to Westeros, a world that we love and enjoyed watching through the different shows that have been presented to us in the different books. But it's focused on chemistry, on a little bit of cheeky moments, on a little bit of fun. It has heartfelt moments and very emotional and very intense fighting scenes, but it's still a little bit of a lighter mood. A lot of people have said that the pace didn't work for them, that's a weakness of the show. But I feel like I really enjoyed slowing down and just taking our time with the characters that the show chooses to focus on and just see the story unfold. So I think, to me, I didn't notice any pacing issues, but I think people that wanted the Game of Thrones feel, the fast-pacedness, even though I would argue that even Game of Thrones had a couple of slow episodes every season. So what are the changes between the TV show and the book? I would say the TV show just slows down and gives us a little bit more background into the characters, and some scenes are a little bit longer than they were in the books. We see different angles of certain situations. Some sequence of events or some sequences of how things go on in one scene are a little bit different, but I think that's what you can expect, because it can't be a word for word, scene for scene adaptation from the book. I think that would be an impossible expectation to have, but I think it successfully carried out the intention and meaning and also effect of a scene. A lot of people wanted a very dramatic Game of Thrones-esque opening title sequence, but I just feel like this is not the spirit of this book or this show. So I found the simpler title sequence that they went with more fitting. I don't think that I can say much about George R.R. Martin's writing, because anyone who has picked up anything by him knows that the man can write. I would say that in this show, the fact that this is based on a short story or a novella, I think that helped, because it gave the writers specific story arc that they can go with, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they could execute. So I feel like that is one of the reasons that this story was as good as it was. A fan favorite character besides Dunk and Egg that a lot of people have been loving and championing is Prince Baylor. And even though I completely understand that a lot of people love this character because of how noble and smart and honorable he is, and how much of a different representation of a Targaryen he is to what we are used to up until now, I think for me, Prince Maekar was as interesting. Even though he didn't have the list of positive characterizations and insight that Prince Baylor had, I thought that Prince Maekar, he had an interesting way of interacting and way of emoting. And I do understand that he's the prince that is angry all the time. I think he's a little bit more complex than that. So I hope we get a little bit more about him. I thought that this was going to be one season and one project, and that would be the beginning and ending of this. But apparently a second season has been announced. So I'm really interested, because there are 2 other novellas that they could use as a jumping off point to tell the story. The next novellas are not exactly after this story, but I think there's a gap of a couple of years. So it kind of shows us a little more about that entire period after the Blackfire Rebellion. I would say that this show, even though it's very simple and just low-key and just trying to focus on this simple story, this show has managed to have a lot of Easter eggs. So anyone who has read the books, watched Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, can probably connect couple of characters, understand a couple of situations more than they should. So I think it's really fun to puzzle and see, oh, this character is in this TV show, or this happened in this book. I think it's connected to this, because there is a lot of gap from where I think House of the Dragon, and I think the book based on that is Fire and Blood, and then Dunk and Egg story collection, and Knight of Seven Kingdoms, and after that, George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire world. This is a vast world. There are a lot of connections to be made, a lot of characters that we know from Game of Thrones that are influencing things behind the scenes in this time era, if we believe the conspiracies. But honestly, I just loved reading this book, watching this show, and just going with the flow. Because I feel like this is such a, I would say, cozy, but I think it's like George R.R. Martin's version of cozy. I don't think it's like my version of cozy, but it had like this sentimental element that I feel like we need more of. I really love this book. I really love the show. And I really think a lot of people could enjoy both the book and TV show. Are you curious about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms? Did you read the book? Are you going to watch the show? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and bye.